Now let's turn our attention to the host system requirements. When you get ready to install VMware, really any virtual product, you need to be concerned with the system requirements for both your host system and your host operating system. Now, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and you always want to make sure which page you're on when you're talking about a virtual environment, and I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. The host system refers to the hardware of the actual machine that's hosting all your virtual machines. Another way to say that, just like you see here, the computer that you installed VMware Workstation on is the host system. Then you have the software side of that host system, and the term we use for that is the host operating system. And that, of course, is the OS, Windows 7, Linux, whatever, that's running on the host system. Now, some of you are thinking, gee, Mark, I'm glad I got the course and you've explained to me, about hardware and software. Well, believe it or not, this will get very confusing, and where it will really get confusing is when people will interchange the terms, or they're in a virtual environment and they'll talk about the system or the operating system. Well, when that happens, you need to flag them down and say, wait a minute, are you talking about the host system or the guest system? The guest system being one of the virtual machines running inside VMware Workstation, because the requirements can be different, and changing the wrong setting on these can create some pretty interesting situations. So always make sure you're understanding whether you're talking about your host system or your guest system. Now, on that host system, you've got some requirements that are kind of interesting. On the CPU or the processor, you're looking for a 64-bit x86, meaning x86 instruction set, 1.3 gigahertz or faster. Now, in the year 2012, it's kind of hard not to get this kind of processor, and this is something you need to watch, especially in virtual computing. The farther you go back, especially when you get around 2009, 2010, which is only 3 years ago, keep in mind, in the corporate world and in the personal world with our laptops and so forth, we tend to run our computers till the wheels come off. And if you've got a machine manufactured around 2009, 2010, you may find that you don't support some of the things you need here, so you need to watch for that. Now, for the nerds among us, you need LAHF and SAHF support in long mode on that processor. And I can just hear some of you saying, and that would be, well, we'll talk about it in a separate video. It is actually pretty interesting, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. For Windows 7, if you're going to run Windows 7 in one of these virtual machines, there are some graphics requirements you need to be aware of. You'll be needing to use an Intel dual core 2.2 gigahertz or later, or an AMD Athlon 4200 plus or later. If you don't have that, you're not going to get the full Windows Aero graphics functionalities and all the cool transparencies and glass effect and all that. Now, as far as memory is concerned, on the host system, you need a minimum of 1 gigabyte. That's going to be kind of bizarre. You're not going to open very many virtual machines. I would say probably no more than one, and depending on what operating system, that's going to be tough. They recommend 2 gigabytes or more. Pay close attention to the or more. You want a lot more than that. The class that I'm going to take you through here in this course, I'm on a machine with 8 gigabytes of memory, and I wouldn't go much less than 6 to be comfortable with this if you're going to run multiple machines. If you're only going to run one virtual machine, you can probably get by with 4 gigabytes, but trust me, it's worth the investment if you've got it to add some more memory. Now, the display for your host system is not a big deal. Just use the latest graphics driver recommended for your host system. So whatever computer you're running, and then you're running, like Windows 7 or something, just make sure you've got the latest graphics driver for it. If you're going to use Windows 7 Aero graphics, you'll need an NVIDIA GeForce 8800 GT or later, or an ATI Radeon HD 2600 or later. And again, if you buy a machine in 2012, it's going to be hard not to hit these, so just be careful about that. If you're purchasing a machine designed to be used for a virtual computing environment, you want to pay close attention to these things, especially if you're talking about a personal laptop that you're going to depend on Workstation to help you work multiple operating systems there. And you'll see that as we move through the course, and I'll continue to point it out. Now, on the disk drives, you can use IDE or SCSI hard drives on the host system. It's not going to be a problem with VMware. Even floppy drives are supported. Even though it's hard to find floppy drives anymore, you can still use those here. Now, as far as the host operating system, let me just say it simply. Windows and Linux. Pretty much any version of Windows and Linux that we're using nowadays is going to be okay. Specifically, let me point you to VMware.com, and just when you get there, search for the compatibility guide. They have a very impressive compatibility guide. You answer all kind of questions, you do all kinds of gyrations there, and they will actually print you out a table. It's a kind of a JavaScript based functionality on the website. You tell them exactly what operating system you've got, and it'll pop back and show you the compatibility guide for the versions and so forth. There's too many to talk about here. We could probably do an 8-hour course just on the various operating systems that are supported and the little nuances of each one. So the bottom line is your host system requirements, you're really limited by two things. That processor that's on there, and we'll talk more about that in a separate video that will be entitled Processor Specifics, and the actual RAM memory. If your processor is okay, Workstation will install. If not, it won't. And then the more memory you have, the better you're off you're going to be, the better you're going to like your life in a virtual environment. So that's your host system requirements for VMware Workstation 8.